Nice.
Hi, everyone. My name is Sean Cotter. I'm the executive director for Wicked Queer, Boston's LGBTQ film festival. And I'm here with Joshua Greasy.
Gersey.
Gersey. Ugh, I knew I was going to fuck it up. Joshua Gersey, the director of Baloney. And we're going to sit and chat, talk about the film, and hash it out. So welcome, Joshua. Glad to have you here and as part of Wicked Queer.
Thank you.
So let's get into it. So your film is Baloney, which is a documentary about a sort of burlesque cabaret show in San Francisco. Tell me a little bit why you chose the subject to document and how you got involved.
Yeah. So Michael is a friend of mine. So we met a while ago. I was shooting a little web series called The Gay Husbands of San Francisco. And that was definitely a work of love, because it was a lot of very talented actors and a very talented director and writer, but we had, basically no money. So we were doing everything ourselves. And I was really attracted to Michael's energy because he was so dedicated to his role. And I learned about, his writing and his own directing, and I wanted to learn more about that. And so when I found out about Baloney, I was like, wow, this is really, it's shocking. I got to go check it out. But when I saw it, I think what really drew me in is that even at its most shocking, it's telling you a very personal and intimate story about the self. And, even if it's, a guy seducing an animatronic dildo on stage, set to, what was that movie Ghost, where she's doing the
right,
pottery is just like that, but it's a dildo. It's beautiful, and it what does it say about the individual? It says a lot, right? You can't really put it into words quite like that choreography. Really, just you feel it.
Well, I think that's one of the great things about sort of your documentary too, is that you present these sort of like the cabaret act, which presents these scenarios that are both kind of shocking, but also very familiar and also very personal and universal, which I think is kind of really wonderful that the Baloney team and crew really kind of like have this sort of thing, and you can tell that how much they all care and respect for each other too, because of the way they sort of relate to each other in the behind the scenes and also on stage too, which is kind of nice. So tell me a little bit about how long did the film take to make?
I think the first frames that I shot was back in 2017. Mm-hmm. Might have even been before that. But took a good 3 years of filming, and then almost like a year of editing after that. And so we were done in 2021, just like literally weeks before frame line.
Oh, wow.
Because even after we were done with the film, as we had it, we were looking around thinking, the pandemic presented some new challenges for the troupe, and it sort of gave us a good closure to the film, so we can kind of follow up and be like, all right, how is it that these Baloney boys are so resourceful to figure out new ways to reach their audience. And so when they were doing this car wash, it was a way of saying, okay, we're going to continue what we're doing. No matter what life throws at us, we're going to find a way to reach and connect with our audience who's dying for that kind of connection, right? And so, the car is a nice, isolated, socially distant experience.
Well, it was. I thought that was super interesting too. Like that, it ended with the sort of the car wash kind of thing, but it definitely mirrored the cabaret performance too, with the audience in their sort of bubble, anyways, and slightly distanced from the stage, but still there was the performance going on. Yeah, I thought there was really kind of like a nice sort of like kind of like bow on the package. In every sense of the word, for the film. Did you, I mean, as you were sort of shooting it and going through it, did you have a sort of like set narrative that you were kind of thinking about how you wanted to sort of like structure the film? Because what I think what's really interesting is that the film is so, it feels very personal, which I really kind of loved about it.
Great. Yeah. It started with something very simple. I was like, I want to show the craft that goes into making this. And I want to juxtapose the, on stage with rehearsal. That's what it started with. Mm-hmm. And I love how, I'm really happy with how that turned out. Once you get into it a bit more, you try to, you find that there's how the performance has touched the performer and how the performer shapes the show, because it's a two-way relationship there. With several of the performers, you see that it has a profound impact on their identity, especially Pablo, but all of them, RP, and how their relationship with the show has given them another venue for how they think about themselves. But that's what I love about making it is sort of getting to know how the show sort of shapes the performer.
Yeah, because often you don't really see that in a very kind of like behind the scenes kind of like sort of exposition on show and stuff like that. You don't really, I mean, you get to meet the folks that are making it, but you don't really get that sort of depth of it. And I found that was really kind of refreshing, to sort of meet the cast and actually kind of really kind of get to know them. And it made you sort of appreciate at the end the sort of the joy that they bring and the joy that they get, and that sort of reality of, life, it sometimes can throw curveballs at you, but still together we can all sort of move forward, which I think was a huge lesson for a lot of us in the pandemic. How do you think that because it sort of ended in the pandemic and you were sort of editing through it, how do you think that your craftsmanship and your filmmaking has changed because of COVID and the pandemic?
Oh,
sorry, that's a big question.
Yeah. Sorry.
And if you need a kitten, that's fine.
Yeah, my kitten's like right here crying at me. I thought she wanted out, but she's staring at me. I think she just wants attention.
She just wants to be on Zoom.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the pandemic has made people appreciate human to human connection. And I think at the beginning when I was making this film, I just show up and I start filming whatever happens in front of me. And the pandemic has sort of trained my mind to think a little bit differently as far as treating those opportunities to film as sort of sacred and special opportunities, and to prepare myself a little bit more and be a little bit more thoughtful about what it is that I'm trying to accomplish when I show up to film. Yeah, that's the best I have right now.
That's completely fair. So how do you, I mean, because you screened this at Frameline. Did you have a in-person screening with it?
Yeah. We had 2 screenings for Frameline, and they're great. Both of them sold out. The first screening had all the Baloney guys in it, so that was the loudest and most rowdy screening. And then the second screening had a lot more industry people that came out, people that were involved in the making of it, and friends of the filmmakers and stuff like that. So it was very special, friends and family sort of event. And then we went down to LA where we had another sold out screening with Outfast. And that was more people from the drag community that the guys are friendly with. So I know we had Ben de la Creme hosting the Q&A afterwards there. And that was great because we got to be able to perform right after the screening. Nice. That was amazing. So during the filming, Daddy had moved away. Daddy Will had moved to Los Angeles. Mm-hmm. And so that was the first time that they were able to perform together. Really, not just since the pandemic, but as with Daddy Will, even longer than that, a good year and a half, I think, or 2 years. Yeah. So that was really special to have all of them there. Everybody that was in the film was in this. So that was really cool. And then that even inspired Daddy Will to come back up to San Francisco for the next performances that they did. I'm really excited to see how the film sort of promotes the troupe. They've already done Provincetown and Palm Springs, but I guess they're going to New York here pretty soon. Last time I saw Rory, he was really excited about that and a bit nervous because he's like, Provincetown or Palm Springs or San Francisco, like it's more the story that people are focused on and not necessarily the choreography. Like his choreography is the storytelling, but in New York, he's like really got to hit those beats. Like we can't be sloppy at all. People are going to judge us if we don't hit our like 2s and our 4s. Like,
right. Somebody with
I'm like, Rory, it's okay. Pad. It's okay. You'll do great. He's like, we can't be missing these things. Like,
but at the same time, I'm like, one of the things that was sort of like, kind of amazing about the documentary too is that yes, it is a performance, but you also get that sort of humanity too of some foibles and a few missteps in the sort of the making of it, which kind of really humanizes the cast, which I think is kind of amazing. Like I don't necessarily want to watch a performance where everyone is robotic and it's perfect.
Exactly.
But I mean, I know that there are people who really get off on that.
Right.
That sort of perfection.
This isn't one of those perfectionist things. It's all about the storytelling and the intimacy. And you don't have that cliche point those toes sort of thing from Rory or Michael. They're more about sort of bringing people in to be themselves and encouraging them to blossom,
right,
expressive wise, as opposed to and I think that that's really interesting, right?
I think that's one of the things that's very fascinating about it is that it does
so supportive. It's supportive.
Yeah, there's a support system that you can kind of, it's tangible through the film. How was the reaction of the cast to the film once they finally saw it?
They were so excited.
Was there any like
I think they were, and I think it was a bit of a surprise as well because I was so guarded with the footage. Michael had seen like an early cut, so and he was familiar enough with me to know sort of what I was, my process and everything, but even he was surprised. I think because once you get the music and the sound design and all these parts come together, it's different than anything that I've ever done before. It was really exciting.
Was there anybody like, oh, I wish that I had more camera time?
No, and I'm surprised because it is a very concise 75 minutes, and we did have to cut a lot of material out of it, because after 3 years you do have a lot of material. But we came away with a stronger piece. Because you have to make a film that is interesting to people who don't know who these people are. That's
exactly.
Challenge.
Yeah, because the thing is, I mean, it'll play in San Francisco, but will it play in Boston?
Right. Yeah, that's interesting. Oh, because we screened in Tampa and Seattle as well, and both of those, people were completely unfamiliar with not just our specific mentality from San Francisco, but they didn't know anything about the show either.
Well, I find that often as a programmer, like we want to celebrate everybody as far as in the community, and especially like in the United States. And sometimes, I often think about the middle of the country, because we always focus on it's San Francisco and LA, and then it's like New York, Miami, but I focus on Boston. Others don't. And that sort of reality of that sort of the coastalness of queerness, and we're kind of miss out on the sort of the whole middle of the country sometimes. And thoughts, and I think that's changing a lot, which I think is really great. So go ahead.
So this film is a celebration of queer spaces in a lot of ways. Everything's featured at the Oasis. There's a little bit in Palm Springs, but also my personal connection to Baloney, I think, starts with my introduction to queer spaces, which happened in Virginia, of all places. So Virginia is still the coast, but Virginia is also the South. Right. So I think my introduction to gay bars was pretty unique. And so it was a bit of a shock when because I moved from Virginia to Seattle. It was a bit of a shock, I think, when I got there and I saw how, your more conventional gay bar operated. Sort of like the first number in the movie, which is the Leather bar number.
Yeah. Was the gay bar in Virginia, was it a small town gay bar?
Yeah. I went to one in Virginia Beach, which, Virginia Beach isn't really a small town, but some friends took me out to some really rural ones. And it was like, wow, this is like somewhere between a redneck bar and a drag queen bar. It just, I kind of want to go back now and find that. Because at the time, in your naivety, you're like, oh, is this normal? Is this like what it is? And then after you go travel and you find other experiences, you look back and you're like, wow, that was a really odd first experience.
Yeah, my own personal sort of first gay bar too was like a small town gay bar. It was a suburban sort of, like, it was pretty small. It was like I think it was called the Randolph Country Club at the time. It had a pool, but it was like, 2 dance floors, a drag queen,
one drag queen,
a handful of folks, very strong drinks. It was like, for me, it was like, going in there, it was like your heart was beating like a mile a minute. And like, but then like after that, like when I got a little bit more like, sort of, I guess, brave, I went to, the big city. And that is where I kind of find my home as far as like queer spaces, as a lot of, gays and lesbians and queer folks do. But yeah, I mean, I just think that sort of universality of that sort of that first time, that story kind of really stuck to me when I was watching the documentary too. Because again, you think about when you go into the film, you're like, okay, what is this really going to be about? I was really kind of surprised by the sort of again, how much I related to the storytelling that was happening, because I didn't expect it. And I think that's you've done a wonderful thing in sort of like kind of showing the world building that is kind of going on in with the Baloney crew and the Baloney team and their space and what they've created. And I like the sort of the end too, where they were talking about the bachelorette party and the sort of how commodified sometimes queer spaces are, and how we can kind of get ourselves out of that. Because again, we don't necessarily want to deny folks from the space, but also that there's a point of respect. And I found that was also very really kind of amazing too, that was also kind of talked about as well, because often you don't think, when you think about burlesque and you think about burlesque performers and cabaret performers, you don't necessarily think about that kind of part of the story, as it were.
Right. Yeah. We were talking before we started rolling about sort of the disappearing of queer culture in our cities. And I think that's a consequence of that. I think as acceptance of LGBT people, rises, more and more people are interested in, being a tourist in these spaces and checking them out and seeing how they can also fit in. But it also sort of like, homogenizes and vanillaizes our queer spaces. And, you were talking about how in Boston there was a notorious vulgar drag queen. Ours is Heklina, who's the owner of the Oasis, and that number is sort of very inspired by her, because she's the one that says, no more bachelorette parties.
Yeah,
you can go to the marina where all the white bread bros hang out.
Yeah, that's the thing, is like, I see the value of, bachelorettes coming to a queer space because it's a safe space. They're not going to get hit on, but at the same time, they in turn often
they become
mirror the behavior of the bros that harass them to the folks that are actually trying to have a space of their own.
Right.
Sort of like switcheroo.
yeah. It's the internalized patriarchy, right?
Yeah, exactly. All right. So my last question, I guess, would be for you is, now that this film is made, what are the plans for it next, and what is your next project?
Yeah, well, I'm really excited. We have a great distribution deal in the works. We're hoping for a good Pride release.
Nice.
I can't reveal much of the details quite yet, but it will be available at home, so that I think a lot of people are really excited about that, especially a documentary where you kind of want to be able to pause it and rewind it and watch parts again, because it's such it's like a hot medium. You really have to soak it all in, there's a lot of, I was like, what just happened there? I need to unpack this scene.
I watched the chopsticks on the piano piece a few times.
Good. Yeah.
I was like, what is going on here?
Yeah. Or even just Pablo and Aaron's interaction, which was so difficult to cut down because their banter is so infectious.
Yeah.
And I really love that when Aaron said, because he's the straight guy, right?
Right, the straight guy.
Pablo's like, oh, hetero. And then he actually is a heterosexual, like both in different quotes.
Well, I also think that like the sort of the use of the sort of the actual representation of queer is very, like, one that's pretty near and dear to us here at Wicked Queer. But I also think that, like, I think that, like, allies that can hang and hang in a space in such a way, in such a kind of like a really kind of amazing way. Because I mean, I, regardless of whether he was heterosexual or not, I would count him just by looking at the interactions as a queer. And
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I just
And
think that
Michael makes
that's
that
also
point,
really
right?
refreshing.
Michael makes that point. I like how he includes straight people and sort of like this, because people ask like, what does queer mean? I think it, you know, in the last 5 or 10 years, that word has been much more popular, and it's like, oh, it means kind of like whatever you want it to mean, but like anybody can be queer.
I'm
No, I love
well,
it.
it's true. I'm also trying to get everyone to capitalize it because it makes it less of an anathema at that point. If it's more of an
Yeah.
identity.
I mean, is anybody really straight? I mean, really, when you get down to it, I don't
Yes.
know. Yes.
The answer is yes. And we all know them. We love them, but we know them. The love that dare not speak its name. So you're getting a release. So
Yeah.
what's next for you? What are you going to shoot next?
What's next for me? Well, I've started development on a deaf project. So my brother is deaf, and I've always wanted to do something sort of to honor him and our relationship. And so the tentative title is Deaf Gain. And so it's based off of this quote. This guy was losing his hearing, and he said, all these doctors, they came to me and they told me about my hearing loss, but they never told me about my deaf gain. So he's referring to sort of, you know, the culture, the community, the language, that is something that you gain access to when you become deaf, or if you're born deaf. And it has a lot to do with, you know, when a child is born in the modern medical establishment, I feel like it's like, your child has failed this very important test, and they're never going to have a normal life unless they have this invasive procedure that's done to them. And this film doesn't really get into the cochlear implant debate, but it will get into sort of, you know, the cultural and the language, and just showing it, showing a disability through an empowerment lens.
I think that's so important because I think that, you know, a lot of people don't necessarily think about like sign language as a language one, even though
Yes.
it is. And
Yeah.
like it's always at this sort of like this framing of it loss or losing, or, you know, this you know, of you know, not as, you know, rich as could be a hearing life or whatever life. And
Yeah.
I'm hoping that like more people, and I'm really happy to hear that you're sort of like, you know, commenting on this and sort of bringing that sort of perspective to the surface, because I think
Yeah.
more of that advocacy is needed.
There's some controversy in it. I through a mutual friend, I was talking to Haben Girma about it. I don't know if you know who she is. She graduated from Harvard Law, deaf blind woman from. Sorry, I'm spacing on where she's from. The important thing is that she was familiar with the concept of deaf gain, and she was like, I don't really like it because it's not very inclusive. A lot of the concepts that's explored by the academics in Jeff Gain have to do with sort of visual superpowers, like the ability to recognize faces, or the ability to detect motion, or patterns, or even peripheral vision. And she was like, not all deaf people have access to those visual gains, and B, she's like, I don't think that, you know, disabled people need to display some superpower in order to be accepted as human beings.
Right.
And she was like, I'd be really disappointed if your film didn't also challenge the concept of deaf gay. And she related it back to sort of the toxicity that's related to body positivity. Because, you know, not everybody feels great about their bodies. And she's like, some people have real issues with it. And so she was like, there's a body neutrality movement, which is sort of just learning to accept your body for what it is, as opposed to trying to, you know, flip the head of, you know, the body negativity movement, which would be, you know, shaming, fat shaming.
Right.
So I was like, that's very interesting.
I think you've got a really good sort of like start with all of this, and I look forward.
Yeah, I have access to a lot of the activists in the space right now. My advisors, you're working across the country with like most recently was in Michigan, where they're advocating for early sign language access. Which just means like when children fail the hearing test, they get access to the actual deaf community to sort of educate families on, so, you know, sort of like, okay, it's not going to be terrible. Yes, it's going to be challenging, but like there is a roadmap to success, and we're going to put you on that. And it's important to have access to actual deaf people to educate you on that.
Yeah, I think that's great. I'm really excited to see it when it's finished, and also hear more of it as it's being made. So please keep in touch with us. So kind of to wrap it up, thank you, Joshua, for sitting down with me and talking about Baloney and all other kind of tangents that we've gone on. I want to let everyone know that Baloney is showing in person at the Brattle Theater on April 9th at 3 p.m. Please buy a ticket and check out the wonderful cabaret world that Joshua has built in sort of bringing us the baloney, as it were. And thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it, and I appreciate your film.
All right. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
All right. Talk to you later.